Welcome to the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show.
Cup of Joe Wrestling Show?
With Joey Harris. A podcast for the wrestling fan on the go. So take your favorite beverage of choice and join Joey as he takes a look at some of the biggest shows on the WWE Network.
From makeshift studios deep in the heart of stately Maine Manor, this is the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show, and I am your host, Joey Harris. Folks, I want to take a moment, just right at the start of the top of the show. The last two shows that I did, I had to record ahead of time because my wife and I took a much-needed vacation. We had not taken many vacation days this year, a day or two here and there. And so we made a plan to go see our families. And because of everything that's happening with the pandemic, it took a lot of planning and weeks ahead of time and planning different things and travel plans and plans to maintain proper social distancing and mask protocols the whole time that we were gone. So with all of that, I had to tape the last two shows together kind of back to back and to make sure that I had something and to get them out. And with that, I overlooked something and some things have happened since then. So I want to take a quick moment right here to acknowledge the passing of Tracy Smothers, who was just a phenomenal person and a phenomenal wrestler and just overall great guy from everybody who knew him and has talked about him. Look up his stuff in WCW. As a member of the Southern Boys / Young Pistols. Look up his stuff from Smoky Mountain and from ECW, as well as anything that you can get your hands on. Shoot interviews, anything. Tracy Smothers just a stand-up guy and will be missed. And it's funny how I was looking one night at different things on YouTube and I came across different Saturday Night Live clips. And so I looked up Celebrity Jeopardy, and just so funny, Daryl Hammond as Sean Connery going back and forth with Will Ferrell as Alex Trebek. And then the next day you see that Sean Connery has passed away. I'm like, oh man, that is wild. And this is something that I heard Ian Fleming many years ago when he was writing the James Bond novels. Pictured, from what I was told, Roger Moore as James Bond. He was what he thought the quintessential James Bond would be. This was before the movies started. And then it was said that forever after, while he was still living, if you went up to Roger Moore and said that you thought that he was the quintessential James Bond, he would laugh in your face and say that that was, is, and always shall be Sean Connery. Everyone else is just playing a role, but Sean Connery was James Bond. And I could not agree more. He was James Bond, as well as that great turn that he did as Henry Jones in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. My favorite Indiana Jones movie. And he's just so good in there. The rapport between he and Harrison Ford was just fantastic. Just another great actor. And then learning that we've lost Alex Trebek. I was on my way in North Carolina to see my sister, and she sent me a text. Rest in peace, Alex Trebek. Another wrestling connection. It's not a great year for the celebrities from WrestleMania 7 with Regis Philbin and now Alex Trebek. But just a fighter all the way to the end. Recorded his last Jeopardy episodes just a couple of weeks before he passed away. That will run up and through Christmas night is what I've been told. And just take a moment to just the class, the professionalism, and just the grace that Alex Trebek brings to that role. So May all three rest in peace. Our hearts, our prayers, and our thoughts go out to them and their families as they grieve the tragic loss of their loved ones. Today, we are looking at the Saturday night's main event from November 1989 from the WWF. This was Saturday night's main event number 24. It was shown on NBC on November the 25th, 1989. That was Thanksgiving weekend. It was taped October 31st, 1989 from the Sunflower State Expo Center in Topeka, Kansas. We start out with the Ultimate Warrior, who says tonight Andre the Giant is going to be like Jack and the Beanstalk, and the Ultimate Warrior is going to chop him down to size. Andre and Bobby Heenan say they are not a fairy tale. Dusty Rhodes says he's going to teach the Big Boss Man a lesson. The Big Boss Man and Slick say Dusty Rhodes is a common thief, not a common man. The Genius has a poem he recites about Hulk Hogan, his opponent for the night. Hulk Hogan says the Genius needs to solve the problem of what you're going to do when Hulkamania runs wild on you. And we go to our opening credits. Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura welcome us to Saturday night's main event. They run down the card before Jesse leaves to interview Andre. Vince then shows a flashback to what has gone down between Andre and the Ultimate Warrior. Jesse interviews Bobby Heenan and Andre. They say the Intercontinental Championship is coming back to the Heenan family. Mean Gene Okerlund interviews the Ultimate Warrior. Warrior starts out growling and pacing. He then says fear is an aberration. Then he rambles. Typical Ultimate Warrior interview. WWF Intercontinental Championship match. The Ultimate Warrior versus Andre the Giant with Bobby Heenan. Andre attacks early. They do some spots to cover that Andre can't do much at this point. Lots of chops and bear hugs. Andre does his patented tie it up in the ropes move, so if you're drinking at home, you can take a shot. Heenan grabs the championship belt. He goes to hit Warrior, but Warrior catches him and throws him into Andre. Warrior wins by disqualification. Jesse interviews the Genius. He delivers a poem against Hulk Hogan. Mean Gene interviews Hulk Hogan. He says the Genius can't win. WWF World Heavyweight Championship match. Hulk Hogan versus the Genius. Hogan pushes Genius out of the ring. Genius is a heat machine here. He is using effeminate moves. Hogan finally gets frustrated and pummels the Genius. Mr. Perfect comes to ringside and grabs the WWF Championship belt. Hogan goes outside and gets attacked by the Genius. Hogan hulks up. The Genius is thrown in, and Mr. Perfect hits Hogan with the championship. The Genius wins by countout. If you have ever heard any sort of shoot interview with Lanny Poffo, he talks about this is his greatest match and his greatest moment in wrestling. To defeat Hulk Hogan, even though it's by countout, on national TV, that never happened. He is right to consider this his greatest moment. It is just a fantastic thing, and it furthers the storyline between Mr. Perfect and Hulk Hogan without sacrificing anything big. Flashback to what's been happening between Dusty Rhodes and the Big Boss Man. Mean Gene interviews Slick and the Big Boss Man. They say they're going to rehabilitate Dusty Rhodes their way. Mean Gene interviews Dusty Rhodes. He says he's the common man for the people. Dusty Rhodes versus the Big Boss Man with Slick. Rhodes tries to get Slick thrown out. Slick, however, has a manager's license and gets to stay. Sapphire is sitting at ringside distracting Slick and the Big Boss Man. Boss Man is working Rhodes over. Slick goes to get the stick, but Sapphire stops him yet again and Rhodes rolls up Boss Man in the meantime. Boss Man and Slick argue afterwards. Sapphire comes in and dances with Dusty Rhodes. Mean Gene interviews the Red Rooster. He's ready for Mr. Perfect with bird puns. Jesse interviews Mr. Perfect. He's going to make everything perfectly clear tonight. The Red Rooster versus Mr. Perfect with the Genius. This is a nice back and forth match. Perfect wins with the Perfect Plex. Mean Gene interviews the Rockers. They say that they are ready for the Brainbusters. Mean Gene then interviews Bobby Heenan and the Brainbusters. They argue amongst themselves. We go to the Brainbusters, Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, with Bobby Heenan versus the Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, a 2 out of 3 falls match. In the first fall, the Rockers just dominate and Jannetty pins Blanchard. In the second fall, Heenan has had it with the Brainbusters and walks out. The Busters lure Michaels into a stun gun-like maneuver and pin him. In our third and final fall, Jesse interviews Heenan. He says that the Brainbusters are fired and done. Back in the ring, Anderson hits a nice spine buster on Michaels. Michaels pins Anderson after a crossbody, and it's so long to the Brainbusters. Mean Gene interviews Mr. Perfect and the Genius. Perfect is destroying the WWF title with a hammer. The Genius is singing in the background. Mean Gene holds the desecrated belt. He brings in Hulk Hogan. He is upset that the Genius won, but the championship is more than a symbolic belt. Vince and Jesse run down what happened and say that when Saturday night's main event returns in January, it will be in a new decade of shows. Hey folks, if you like the show, please leave a review in iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or your podcast platform of choice. There are a number of ways that you can contact me. You can follow the show's Twitter at cupofjoepod. You can email the show at cupofjoewrestlingshow@gmail.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I am at The Joey Harris. Thank you for joining me this week. This is Joey Harris saying so long from Stately Maine Manor.
The Cup of Joe Wrestling Show is a production of Baby Kangaroo Media.